There are people all over the world that really don't have anybody to turn to ask these questions or to get to pray with them. Or maybe it's their life if they do. And they are very grateful to you that you would be willing for this to be videoed and that you would even be open enough to ask them questions and to make it real, because they can't experience this classroom atmosphere. They have no idea what it's like. And they write things like, "Dear Mom, by this I know that you truly love us, that you would share these videos with us." It doesn't have to be any longer than that, does it?
No.
Somebody cares about us. That we're the only ones that aren't this other religion in our whole area. We're alone. And it feels good. So I'm really thankful to you. I want you to feel free to raise your hand, ask a question, make a comment anytime. That's what makes these things good. I want to talk about soul ties. Some of you know all about this already. You may have something to contribute. But for those that don't, I've always got a story to tell. And to explain again why we pray 7 prayers. I do this all the time. For a living, if you will. People come from afar because they have things they don't want in their life cycles. They haven't been able to get rid of it. And they want a fresh prayer of agreement. But we prayed over the generational things that God revealed. Now we're going up to this foundational level of the soul ties. It's a small prayer, again. It doesn't sound very significant in a way. But a lot of times we're joined at the heart to someone in our past. They taught us something. It's been hard not to believe that same way. Or maybe they said things against us. They said word curses over us, and they wouldn't even know what a word curse is. They didn't mean to. I remember someone saying over me, "If there's a cook around, Carlotta will find him." It seemed to be true. It seemed like a curse. But curses don't have to be something over a boiling pot with, parts from things. And, it can be just something that somebody said you've never been able to forget it. Maybe you catch yourself saying it over yourself. Maybe you catch yourself believing it or proving it to be true in your own eyes. Or maybe you had a relationship that was that good and it was wrenched from you and it's been hard to let it go. And it still affects your life in a very strong way. Or maybe it was that bad. Maybe you were abused and you learned to be loyal to abuse. And you learned, I don't know who to look at, I don't know any of you. I'm just looking around. Maybe you learned to be loyal to the abuser. Maybe they taught you, "I love you so much, that's why I'm beating you." And your definition of love got mixed up. To this day, you don't really know what love is supposed to be because they taught you this is love. Or you attracted this abuse, or you deserve it. There's so many options to what a soul tie can be, but it definitely doesn't have to be anything that involves anything sexual. A lot of people limit it to that. They think it's the people you've slept with or been married to or ran around with or something. But it can be anyone who you came into agreement with about something that is not God's truth or not God's best. So that can include wonderful people in your past, but maybe you were in agreement about something that wasn't godly. It can be your own family. It can even be your parents that you have an ungodly soul tie with. So obviously we don't want to break all ties, just the ungodly ones. Okay, we got that much straight. When you pray soul ties prayer and you're breaking ungodly soul ties, we're not throwing away this family member forever. Even if they need to do a lot of repenting, we're still not throwing them away. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it can be actually a soul tie with one of the best relationships you've had in your whole life. But maybe in some way it's holding you back today. Maybe you don't even know it's holding you back until another opportunity comes up, and that's where my story comes in. When I was a teenager in Jacksonville, Florida, I probably shouldn't have said that much. My father was on staff at the church. His father was on staff at the church. We weren't even old enough to drive, so we couldn't get in too much trouble. Back then, he couldn't drive. It was hard to get in trouble, but we had almost a perfect relationship. If any of you were in puppy love, you may be able to relate to this. You're not old enough to have all the bills and all the problems. You just get to enjoy the love part, and it's great. We had so much in common. We did jail ministry together. But when I was 16, I think, my father got a transfer to Atlanta. And now, you've got to get this picture. I was this tall, only weighed 90 pounds. I was a stick with nothing to offer. I was very fortunate to have gotten this football player that could play with teams 2 years older than him. And my father was transferred. I didn't have a complaint in the world. Until the day came on February the 14th. Everybody know what that is? Our school, with the winning teams, you know which one always won in Jacksonville, had about 2,000 students. And he was such a good football player, he'd be allowed to come over and play with them, but he could also sing. And on Valentine's Day, he sang, "You Are My Special Angel." Tells you how old I am. And everyone there knew it was to me. And then my father whisked me away to an empty house where the vans had already been loaded up. And that was it. That was it. We weren't old enough to do long distance or even old enough to think through what it would take to run away. Maybe some of you did, and I wished I had at some point, but I didn't. Got headaches studying too much, trying to cope with the best thing that ever happened to me being taken away. Didn't know, though, that it was an ungodly soul tie. Didn't know that 10, 20, 30 years later. Until some circumstances changed in his life, and he appeared at my door. 33 years later, you know what my heart said? What was taken away from me, I finally have back. He was thinking the same thing. We hit it off for a weekend. He had to go back. We still stayed out of trouble. We did that. Today's society. But when I realized that my beliefs had changed so much, because y'all know, you can see, this is just the tip of the iceberg, how radical I am. But he hadn't changed. And after 2 or 3 weeks of emailing, I could see it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Our beliefs are too important to us. We're both in full-time ministry. It's not going to work. I had to start grieving again. What had taken me months, maybe years, to grieve before. All over again to the original depth of the wound. I'm surprised I'm not crying. God does heal. About 5 weeks later, I cried out for help to the man that mentored my father, who I consider the Indiana Jones of tearing down strongholds internationally. And I said, I've done everything I know to do. I cannot get rid of this spirit of grief. I'm going through it again. I can't stop it. It was a soul tie. Yours may not be this bad. Mine was bad. And Dr. Kasner could pray away anything, I think. And quick as he prayed for me, it was gone. But I had been crying every day since that happened. I couldn't get rid of that spirit of grief, and he broke it. It wasn't normal grief. It was a spirit of grief that meant to stay with me forever this time. Some of you are dealing with things and it's more soulish or psychological. It's in your mind, in your will, in your emotions. But if you change your thinking, you can probably deal with it. Some of you were out of agreement with God and you didn't realize it. You didn't mean to be what I call loyal to abuse. You saw your kids being loyal to abuse. You'd say, you don't have to do that. They're abusive, you know. Love doesn't mean you're loyal to abuse. And you didn't know that. But some of you have experienced a soul tie or something that even though you wanted to break it, you couldn't. It's just wrapped around your heart. Or maybe you just went for yoga classes, you didn't mean to embrace any kind of teachings, and you found yourself falling in for teachings that didn't agree with God. It can be so many different things. It can be your coach whose opinion meant too much to you. It can be a lot of things. Teachers have a lot of influence over us. A boyfriend, whatever. A parent who still defines who you are instead of God. You need to break the ungodly part. So you have an opportunity to do that today. And it's real simple. You just ask the Lord, with whom do I have ungodly soul ties that are contributing to this heart issue? And you might be surprised. You ask for a fish, God will give you one. He'll show you. might even show you something that goes on the next page. We're not there yet, but if he shows it to you, it's okay to write it down. You may have developed a negative expectation, believing people will all treat you this way. This is my lot in life, I deserve it, or I'm not worthy. You see where it says, I expect or believe? We're not there yet, but if God brings it to mind, it's okay to go ahead and write down what negative expectation I will be overlooked and not chosen, those things. We're going to go into that more. But I'm just letting you know, if you're like me, when God shows you something, you need to write it down right then, because you may not remember it later. What I'd like you to do now, because we're going to try to do all 6 prayers in the next 3 hours. That means we have to have the teaching, and you pray for each other on each one in just 30 minutes. Okay, this is the Just Do It seminar. So I'd like you to identify who contributed the most to your heart issue on number 1. And it may be kind of a related issue. That's okay too. If God shows you these two are like twins, they go together. You don't feel worthy, so you don't obey me, or you don't take advantage of opportunities, or you shoot yourself in the foot, or you self-sabotage. Or you don't feel worthy, so you compete and compare. There can be things that are like little twins, and they go through your life. But I'd like you to write down the person that contributed the most to number 1. We're not breaking all ties, as God says to. We're just breaking the ungodly part. See, and when I'm married again, I said I never would, but when I'm married again, I needed to have that broken. I need to let God bring my heart back together. I don't need part of it still hanging out here with my high school boyfriend. A lot of people have that. Part of their heart is still with somebody else. It's good to have it back. And God says He's making us whole. Any questions? You see that prayer on soul ties?
I have a question.
Yes.
What goes in the blank on number 2? A person or the issue?
Well, it is strange the way he wrote it. I didn't write this. But he's asking, with whom do I have ungodly soul ties that are contributing to the heart issue of? And I suppose if it's slightly different, you could put some other adjoining issue there. But what he's really after is, he says, examine parents, authority figures, teachers, pastors, close friends, and spouse. And I had coaches. Usually, yeah, we're after a person, but there may also be something specific that they said over you. They may have loved you too much or too little. It can go either way. But if you want to write down what they contributed to this, you can. But what we really want to do, for sure, is break the ungodly soul tie with them. If I had not done that, that could have interfered with my relationships from then on. And maybe had all along. Probably did. It's probably one reason I had a lot of difficulty with relationships. But it's broken now. And several of these things that we're going to pray today, like inner vows and these soul ties, you can try to do it by yourself. Most likely it will not work. You have to have someone to pray in agreement with you, or preferably someone with some spiritual authority that understands we do have the authority to break this. Even though you made an agreement with them a long time ago, maybe in my case it's probably 100 or 1,000 agreements with him. I can pray a simple prayer, just like that simple prayer you prayed to receive Christ, and the dead spirit is gone, the new spirit's in, and all these changes happen in your life. If you will believe and receive, this is just as powerful. Jesus died on the cross to not only heal us, but to set us free. You'll be surprised the results you get. Why are we doing all this? I take people through and take 2-3 hour histories and get a minimum of 8 or 9 pages of these things that need to be prayed about, the spiritual roots in their life. And then we ask forgiveness 5 ways. Sometimes they can see what I see right off, sometimes not, but then I give them godly beliefs, just like you're going to write next, and their true identity and all, to start declaring and decreeing it for 40 days, and the insight starts coming. they start seeing, oh, I do that. I'm doing it again. I want to do it again. I've always done it this way. Why not? And they begin to see it. But what we're doing here is we're learning how to pray like far more thoroughly than maybe you ever have before. And say somebody comes to the altar and they ask for prayer just to be able to keep a job. And they say, I can never seem to keep a job more than a year. They're expecting you to just pray that they'll be able to get a job and keep it. But this is going to ruin you. After you've seen how to pray 7 ways over a thing and asking forgiveness 5 ways, you know how a teacher can teach something and make it look easy? It doesn't look near, like the 8-year degree that they've got. Well, you're going to know how to just ask a couple questions. Who taught you to think that way? Who taught you you're not worthy? And you're doing this one right here. And you'll be able to just pray with them to break the ungodly part of that tie, to receive the truth, to cancel the generational inheritance that they feel like, well, everybody in my family's this way, I'm just doomed to be this way. And then you're going to be able to identify the main lie and to help them know how to replace it, not just with a positive confession, not just with a verse, but I mean really choose to receive what God says about it. After they've broken the power of it, you're going to know how to, just in a quick way, help them receive healing for that. Have a new picture in their minds instead of the old ones. You'll see. You can make even just altar ministry, but certainly if you have a whole evening, like if you had supper together or something, you're going to be able to take them through and really get healing and freedom in this area. But if you are like me, you go to this seminar. I went to this seminar and I said, I've got about 100 places I need this for. I signed up and I got it. Now every time I take someone else through it, I get a little bit more. So don't be looking at me like you're already done already, because there's always more in Jesus. Yes, there's always more. And the humble man knows he needs more. Humility's our friend. So I'd like you to get with that same partner if that's okay. If your partner went home or something, I can work with you. And have that prayer of agreement. Have them own their spiritual power and authority to pray for you and get this tie broken that was based on anything less than God's truth.